Hi everyone, my name is Ben, and this is Comic Book Breakdown. On today's episode, I wanted to talk to y'all about a more recent thing happening in the world of comic books, something that has yet to happen, actually. This isn't something I've done on the show before, but for whatever reason, I'm kind of fascinated by the idea of it, so I wanted to talk about it with you folks. My cat Konark decided to join me. Did you bring a toy, or are we good? We're good. Okay. I'm talking about Marvel's upcoming Contest of Champions. Recently advertised in some of Marvel's comic books, and of course their digital presence online, has been this not quite an event. Let me give you some background on what this is before I really get into the stuff that I wanted to talk about. Author Steve Orlando has been writing the most recent volume of the Scarlet Witch ongoing series with gorgeous covers by Russell Dauterman. Oh my god, this book looks so good. And I've really been enjoying it. The book has been really standalone. It hasn't relied on a lot of previous history. Like, there are nods to the rest of Wanda's life and history, where if you're familiar with her, great, and if not, then you're just being introduced to these pieces of lore to her background. We've met her brother, Quicksilver. We've met her ex-half-sister, Polaris, aka Lorna Dane, the daughter of Magneto. But really, the book's been kind of free of continuity, and it's really been building up a Wanda-focused corner of the Marvel Universe, in a way that I've only ever really seen James Robinson kind of do before in the last volume of a Scarlet Witch ongoing series. But one of the interesting things that Marvel has been doing in the background of their ongoing series through a series of miniseries is, of course, they have been revamping the character of Agatha Harkness. Agatha famously was the nanny for Franklin Richards over in the Fantastic Four back in the, 70s through the 80s. She shows up again in the 90s, but Agatha's never really been a marketable character. She has generally looked like the oldest living thing in Marvel Comics, just kind of this old witch look of a woman. And recently Marvel gave her a revamp thanks to her presence on the WandaVision Disney Plus TV show and tying in with Scarlet Witch's storyline there. This new younger version of Agatha, who debuted in the Midnight Suns miniseries, has kind of been wandering around just minding her own business until recently, in the second most recent, I believe it's issue 9 if I remember correctly, issue 9 of Scarlet Witch, Agatha actually shows up and she tests Wanda's ability to contain the Darkhold and the Dark God Chthon. Now, this is actually something that I didn't know going into this run, but this is a reference to the Steve Orlando written Darkhold. Again, I hesitate to call it a miniseries, but at the end of that story, Wanda took the Darkhold, which is basically the most evil book in the Marvel Universe. This thing has the power to undo reality. It grants terrible powers to whoever wields it, but they also go batshit
No swearing.
insane, and they are not able to remain who they were. And at the end of that series, in order to negate the threat of Chthon and the threat of the Darkhold, Wanda just magically absorbed them into her soul. So yeah. And Agatha shows up and she basically goes, look, dear, you can't handle this level of power. I can. Let me help you. And Wanda spends an entire issue showing Wanda that, no, she's got this. She is more powerful than ever. She is more confident of her power than ever. She can handle whatever life throws at her, even if it's Chthon and even if it's the Darkhold. And at the end of the book, the Scarlet Witch ends up defeating Agatha, and she kind of goes away going, okay, dear, you've got this. You know what? I'm going to trust that you can handle this. What Wanda doesn't know is that Agatha left a little piece of herself behind in Wanda's soul, and it is looking for a way to either use or absorb, or maybe free Chthon in exchange for power. We don't really know Agatha's endgame at this point, but it is meant to lead into what you see on the screen before you as the Contest of Chaos, which is a kind of an excuse to have superheroes fight each other in a series of annuals being released over the next 2 months, August and September. We kind of get the first half of the books and then the second half of the books. And at first, when Marvel announced this, I was honestly kind of unimpressed. In fact, if I remember correctly, the original press release had, I think, either the editor in charge of it or one of the writers who was like, this is exactly the kind of event the kind of annual event that when I was a kid I would have rushed to my comic store to buy. And I kind of chuckled because I have collected several event storylines that have played out through annuals. None of them are very good. Sorry, mid-90s, they aren't. I don't care if we're talking Atlantis attacks. I don't care if we're talking the Lifeform crossover. I don't care. I've never really enjoyed any of these annuals. I've bought them because they're part of the continuity and because they're part of these books. And if you're an Uncanny X-Men annual, because the art was by Arthur Adams, which is just gorgeous. But the point remains, I've never been excited for an annual purchase. And honestly, I wasn't excited for this event at all until I saw this image before me and this like video game select your fighter character select screen. Because then I just started looking at the matchups and I was like, well, actually, this is kind of some interesting, there's kind of some interesting things here. So let's talk about these a little bit. Let's put some bets down on who our winners are going to be, shall we? Our first annual, of course, is the Amazing Spider-Man annual, which sees a classic matchup of Spider-Man versus Wolverine. Now, I gotta say, out of all of these fights, this is probably the one that I'm the least interested in because who cares? These two characters have met a bajillion times, they have fought a bajillion times, and honestly, if you want a really good Wolverine Spider-Man storyline, I would suggest you check out Jason Aaron's astonishing Spider-Man and Wolverine, might be Astonishing Wolverine and Spider-Man, but it's a really great romp through time with these two characters, and it really demonstrates why they don't get along very well, but also why they respect the hell out of each other. Which is kind of what you want a good superhero team-up story to be, right? We know these characters aren't going to kill each other because they're just too valuable as properties, so no matter what happens in this issue, even if somebody wins, does anybody really care? We're going to care if it's an entertaining fight, and that's kind of what I want to talk about a little bit. For me, like I said, I don't think this is really interesting, but when you think about the writing perspective of how do you write this story, I mean, A, it is a Spider-Man annual, so it's very likely that Spider-Man's going to win this fight. It's not much of a Spider-Man annual otherwise, is it? Then it's a Wolverine annual featuring Spider-Man. So I think Spidey's going to end up taking this fight, which honestly makes sense for a number of character reasons. The first of which is that Wolverine knows who Spider-Man is. Does he actually? I actually don't know. I think he knows who Spider-Man is. They met during last year's Hellfire Gala to rescue Mary Jane. I feel like Wolverine knew who he is. But in any case, even if he doesn't know that Spider-Man is Peter Parker, Wolverine knows that Spider-Man is a great guy, that he's self-sacrificing, that he's kind of a loser, and that no matter what happens to Wolverine in this fight, he's going to walk away okay. He will recover from whatever physical damage is done to him. He will recover from whatever emotional damage is done to him because he's just going to get blackout drunk. Wolverine kind of can't lose this fight in a lot of ways, not just for publication monetary reasons. Wolverine also famously has adamantium claws, which he can't really use on Spider-Man without causing, you would think, permanent damage, but again, you just don't have him use the claws in the story. I can easily see Spider-Man using his webbing to keep Wolverine at a distance, web up his claws, web him to things, punch him in the face a couple times, trap him in stuff. There's a bunch of inventive ways that Spider-Man can stop Wolverine. It just depends on what locale they're placed in. And I don't really care how this one ends up. I'm not going to lie. But if I had to pick, I mean, I would argue that if you're going to do a knockout, all bets are off. I do think that Wolverine wins this fight, simply because he is willing to go places in a fight that Spider-Man is not. Like, Peter has to be emotionally devastated to go to the lengths of damage that Wolverine will when he's in a fight, right? Where Wolverine will start at that point. Like, he's okay with, like, let's start this off stabbing, and then we escalate from there, and we'll see how many limbs you get to keep. And I just don't see, in a real fight, I don't see Spider-Man walking away from that. However, this is Spider-Man's annual, so I would think that he's going to win. But again, Spider-Man's kind of had a crap time of it over his own amazing series at the moment. A lot of fans have been complaining about it. I haven't been reading it because I don't really care. I have not been buying the last couple of years of Spider-Man comics. I just wasn't interested in them. for whatever reason. It's the first time I haven't been buying Spidey in quite some time, actually. But yeah, I think Spider-Man's going to win this, partially because this is his book, to be quite honest. He's already a big name character. Wolverine is a softie when it comes to the people that he likes, and he does like Spider-Man, even if he does think that he's a huge nerd and a bit of a loser. So I think Spidey's going to take this. I think in a real fight, Wolverine would take it, unless somehow, for some reason, Wolverine like killed Mary Jane or Aunt May or something like that, and they really pissed off Spider-Man, and I just don't see him doing that. So I think Spider-Man is going to take this one. Round 2. This is kind of the fight that started getting me like thinking. This is going to be the Invincible Iron Man versus Storm. Again, this is an interesting fight because my first thought is that this is a fight that kind of goes back and forth really easily. Like a Tony Stark who knows he's going to get into a fight with Storm can really easily build a bunch of devices into his suit that will allow him to regulate his body temperature, or absorb or redirect her lightning blasts, or create force fields that can shrug those kinds of things off with relative ease. Like, Tony's made armors that have flown into the depths of space, that have killed gods before. I'm pretty confident that he can handle Storm, as amazing as she is, if he has all of his resources and if he so chooses to. And that, to me, is where things get interesting. Because if I remember the current status quo of Invincible Iron Man, which, again, I have not been reading, if I remember correctly, he doesn't have those resources. Tony's got, like, a suit of armor, and he has kind of been struggling to keep up with the forces that threaten him. So this is a Tony who can't really call out an arsenal of suits. He can't pull up the Hulkbuster armor and punch Storm in the face for it. He can't command 15 suits at a time to attack her. And this version of Storm, this current version that we've been getting over in X-Men Red, is a Storm who looks at herself with the confidence of the goddess that she was viewed as a teenager. This is a woman who has helped fight back the Eternals. She just watched Magneto die. She not only watched Magneto die, but she watched him bravely sacrifice himself while there was a hole in his chest, and he kept his own blood pumping by manipulating the iron in his blood when he didn't have a heart. This is a Storm who is more ready to kick ass than I would argue she has ever been in her life. And there's a little bit of a weird added benefit that the Invincible Iron Man title is almost a periphery X-Men title at the moment. The current author of Invincible Iron Man, Jerry Dugan, who is not writing the annual, by the way, has been working in a lot of background plot elements that he either started over in the current X-Men ongoing series, or he's trading back and forth between Invincible and X-Men. And in fact, in a couple months, Iron Man's going to be getting married to the White Queen of X-Men fame. Either upsets some fans or is very exciting. I'm a little annoyed. Hello, Co. I'm a little annoyed because I wasn't buying Invincible Iron Man because I don't really like Iron Man in the comic books all that much. And now I have to somehow hunt down all of his back issues so I can be up to date with what's going on there. Oh, when I get money. But in any case, with this title, Iron Man vs. Storm, I give this one to Storm. And I know I'm an X fan, I know I'm biased, but we're also getting a Storm who is at her most ferocious right now. She is unwilling to back down from a threat. She is unwilling to kind of hold back from a threat. And I just can't see how Tony is going to be able to keep up with something like that. If he beats her, I mean, I won't be super surprised. Again, Iron Man's one of Marvel's most visible characters. Invincible Iron Man's his flagship title right now. It's the only Iron Man title, other than maybe a miniseries that's currently ongoing. But given that Iron Man's also kind of been subsumed under the X-Men line right now, it's kind of a good time to lower his profile a little bit and let the X-Men live it up. So I give this one to Storm. Round 3. This is another fight that really interests me. The Human Torch versus Ghost Rider. Because you look at them and you're like, oh, it's two fire-based characters. This is going to be a stupid fight. But the trick with that, though, is the Ghost Rider is not a being of fire. He is a being of hellfire. He is a supernatural character, not a science fiction character. And so that's a completely different threat to someone like Johnny. And thinking about it, the two characters have met each other before. I actually have been reading through the late the late end years of Fantastic Four Volume 1 recently, and as part of a plotline, Spider-Man actually gathered up the new Fantastic Four, consisting of Ghost Rider, Wolverine, Hulk, and Spider-Man, plus Doctor Strange's astral form, to stop Johnny after he accidentally set fire to Empire State University in a plotline that I'm not going to get into here. But the two characters didn't really fight all that much. The Human Torch was generally like blasting at the other characters, trying to keep them from harming the Fantastic Four, who of course came to Johnny's defense. But in terms of Hellfire versus Fire, like, and this is a Fantastic Four annual, but like my instinct is this is Ghost Rider's fight. As the Spirit of Vengeance, Johnny can tap into an almost unlimited well of energy. Like the Ghost Rider almost beat the Hulk a couple years ago. Oh God, it's more than a couple years ago at this point. But back during World War Hulk, when the Hulk came back to planet Earth and he was about to kill a whole bunch of people in New York City, Ghost Rider went toe-to-toe with him for several rounds. And it's only because the Hulk was as enraged as he was that he managed to defeat the Ghost Rider. But Johnny hasn't really been rocking those power levels recently. He's been much more down to earth. His own ongoing series treats his powers much more subtly. The book's trying to lean much more for like a horror movie feel, and I've actually really been enjoying it by Benjamin Percy. It's kind of what I feel like I would have written a Ghost Rider comic book as. But Johnny is also incredibly powerful. He can burn with the power of a sun. He is a skilled, well-trained, inventive, experienced fighter. And although Ghost Rider could probably continuously pull Hellfire bikes out of his butt, in theory, Johnny could keep destroying those bikes. When Ghost Rider sends chains after him, Johnny could melt those. It just really depends how much the author wants to play up the supernatural aspect of Ghost Rider's ability versus, oh, Ghost Rider has these chains that he generates, and the generation of them is magical, but then they are actually just steel metal chains. Oh, look, Johnny can melt those. So this one's kind of going to go back and forth. I do tend to think this one's going to lean towards Johnny winning the fight, because out of the two, Johnny's character is also the more, like, super heroic. Like, Ghost Rider's cool, but he's generally treated as an anti-hero. And he hasn't even really done that many, like, he's not the Punisher. He's not Wolverine. Like, the character looks badass and terrifying, but he really does not, like, kill or maim or hurt that many people. So if I were writing this, I think Ghost Rider wins it, if only by pinning down Johnny long enough to hit him with a penance stare, which would make Johnny relive all of the most terrible moments of his life, all the moments when he's had fears and doubts and hated himself the most. And Johnny's had a long superheroic career, and he's done some really terrible things emotionally to, like, his friends and family. So I do tend to think I would write this with Ghost Rider winning the fight. I do think Johnny's going to take it because he's the more superheroic superhero, though. Round 4, the Moon Knight annual. This is another interesting matchup. It is Moon Knight versus a relatively new Marvel character, a Korean superhero, named Taeguk Gi. Taeguk Gi is a member of the Tiger Division. It is Korea's, like, superhero team. I think they kind of sort of work for the government. I have bought everything that the Tiger Division has appeared in, but you would be surprised at how little has been established about the characters. Marvel has basically gone, these characters exist. Do you like them? We'll make more comics if you like them. And that's kind of been a bit of a crapshoot. The Tiger Division, the first Tiger Division miniseries did recently wrap up, and Taeguk Gi actually appeared in issue 14. It might have been 14 of Ghost Rider in a little backup comic. He pretty much has your standard set of superpowers: invulnerability, flight, super strength. I think he can shoot lasers from his eyes, and he's going up against Moon Knight, a character whose most famous superpower is that he's crazy. Real quick, this is Ben in the future coming back in time for just a second. To clarify what I mean when I say Moon Knight is crazy, I'm not talking about the fact that he has multiple personality disorder. I'm talking about the fact that Moon Knight as a character can become one of the most violent superheroes that I've ever read. Moon Knight once carved the face off of one of his bad guys. He sealed another one recently inside a concrete box in the bottom of a building that was being constructed, like mobster style. Like, in terms of someone who's willing to escalate violence against those who stand against him, Moon Knight is one of the probably meanest characters I've ever met. At least the Punisher, generally speaking, is just out to kill you. Moon Knight is out to make you suffer. So when you do Moon Knight versus Taeguk Gi, I don't really think Moon Knight's going to be going all out and trying to kill him and do some actual damage to him, but I do think that Moon Knight in a fight is going to be willing to go places that Taeguk Gi, as someone who is still trying to figure out what it means to be a superhero and how does he be a superhero, he's willing to go places Taeguk Gi will not and cannot as of yet. When I say Moon Knight is crazy, the multiple personalities has nothing to do with it. It's the fact that Moon Knight will floop you up really hardcore. The rest of it's just icing on the cake. Back to the video. Thank you, Past Ben, for, I don't know, sitting there. But yeah, Moon Knight famously has no powers, and he's basically going up against Korean Superman. That's a heck of a fight, man. This is one of those things where if you were just putting the two of them in an empty room and having them punch each other, like, let's do punchies, bro, Taeguk Gi should win it. There is kind of a trade-off that even if Moon Knight was killed, in theory, Khonshu, his avatar, the god of the moon, could just resurrect him and bring him back to life. I do know in Moon Knight's ongoing series, there's been a revelation in this recent volume that Khonshu can only do it so many times. And I believe Mark Spector's on his last life, so to speak. So, you know, A, I don't think Taeguk Gi would try and kill Moon Knight anyways. B, if Moon Knight did die, he could get resurrected. C, unless Khonshu decides he can't because reasons. But the trade-off with that is Mark Spector is driven in a way that Taeguk Gi is not. The character is still figuring out how to be a superhero and what does that mean to them as an individual. The recent Tiger Division miniseries was pretty much a Taeguk Gi miniseries, giving us his origin and who he is as a person. And so for me, like, Moon Knight's got the edge in just terms of, like, he will do whatever it takes to beat this guy. And Taeguk Gi is inexperienced enough that I don't think he's got the necessary skills or experience to defeat someone like Moon Knight. It should be an easy win for him, but, you know, Moon Knight's gone up against worse and walked away. So, on the one hand, like, this is one that I'm really torn on. Like, this is an annual I'm definitely going to buy just because I want to see how this shakes out, regardless of who's the one who wins this fight. It's going to be an interesting fight, no matter what. So I will give this one to Moon Knight. Again, the character's got a pretty high profile within Marvel in general at the moment. The Moon Knight Disney Plus show was really well received. The current ongoing series has been pretty well received. The character just got a new spin-off series, Moon Knight City of the Dead. They're about to do the last big final story arc of Jed McKay's run on Moon Knight as well. So, you know, this is the time to up Moon Knight's profile. And, you know, if they can up Taeguk Gi while they do it, hey, so be it. I would like to see more of Tiger Division so I can know what I'm talking about a little bit more when I do talk about them. I also just really like this cover. This is a good-looking cover. So I give this one to Moon Knight. You take it away, sir. Spider-Gwen versus the White Fox. Another interesting matchup in that these are two characters who wouldn't really cross paths themselves. Spider-Gwen, of course, has all the powers of a spider person, plus the ability to play drums really well. The White Fox is a kumiho, a Korean fox spirit. She's able to, like, shapeshift and turn into a nine-tailed fox character. She's generally treated as a spy. She's kind of like Korea's answer to the Black Cat, except she works for the government, the South Korean government. I actually really like this character in what stories I have seen her in. She hasn't appeared in a lot recently. I'm kind of surprised that they're bringing her into the Contest of Chaos, to be quite honest. Like, Taeguk Gi I get because he's had his profiles kind of getting boosted a little bit more recently. I am surprised to see White Fox. This is another one where I think there's a clear and easy winner, and it's Spider-Gwen. The character's insanely popular right now, coming out of Across the Spider-Verse. She's got, for as few years as she's got under her belt as a superhero, she has a lot of experience, and a lot of it's facing really crazy stuff, whereas White Fox, despite being older, has way less stories told about her, so she simply has been around less time, and so I don't think she's nearly as experienced as Gwen is. I would argue White Fox is probably more dangerous, but I don't think she's got the chops to take down Gwen. She'll outthink her, she'll outmaneuver her. White Fox might be able to cast illusions. I don't 100% remember, and that could come into play. I don't know. Could also be totally wrong. It's been a while since I've read a story that's got White Fox as a lead character in it. I was just looking at my Marvel Future Fight one-shots the other day, which introduce White Fox. There's a White Fox one-shot. I was just looking at those the other day, asking myself if I wanted to read them. Maybe I should, as like a warm-up for this again. But I think this one easily goes to Spider-Gwen. This is a good matchup, I think. This is a good base of powers. White Fox is not so over the top that Spider-Gwen has no choice, like no chance against her. I'm sorry. But I also think that Gwen is... her power set is really well known, but she's never encountered White Fox before, or anybody really like her. So this is going to be again, this is one of those fights where I was like, I want to see this fight. Like, I want to see how this goes type of things. This is one that I'm definitely going to be picking up. Round 6 brings us to the fight I'm probably the least interested in. Venom versus Deadpool. It's the 90s off. If you throw in Ghost Rider, this would be a 90s off, to be quite honest. Both of these characters got really popular in the 90s. Both of them were created as villains. Both of them evolved into anti-heroes, and both of them have become just pop sensations in ways that few comic book characters have. You go and look at any Venom comic published during the 90s, and there's a lot of them. But you look at any of those miniseries, and it's like $10 an issue. You look at Deadpool from this time, it's like $10 an issue. These are both characters that the broader comics, even for people who don't read comics, like, they know who Venom is, and they know who Deadpool is, and it inflates the price of their comics like crazy, and I hate it. I hate this one shot just on the basis of that alone. Not that it has any actual bearing on it, but still, I hate it. It doesn't help that I'm honestly not a fan of Deadpool, kind of almost at all, especially the way Deadpool's been portrayed in the last kind of years, where Deadpool has gone from somebody who is dangerous but talks a lot to somebody who is silly and goofy and talks a lot. Deadpool has really lost his edge, and I'm not saying that he needs to have his edge to be a good character. The fact that Deadpool connects with so many people, if anything, indicates what a great character he is, and that he does deserve his spot in the spotlight that he has. It's just never really hit for me. There's so many characters that I think are more interesting and are more fun and are more creative than Deadpool is. I know this is a me thing. This is not a Deadpool thing. This is a me thing, everybody. Please, if you're going to hate me, but that's just how it is for me. Going into this fight, the really important thing that's going to make a difference is whether this is Deadpool fighting Eddie Brock as Venom, or Deadpool fighting Dylan Brock, Eddie's son, as Venom. Venom is one of the few comics that I've been keeping up with, because I'm a 90s boy. Like, I'm a sucker for Venom. I am a sucker for symbiote stories, and Marvel's been cranking them out this summer. And one of the things that's going to make this fight really complicated is both Eddie Brock and Deadpool can physically recover from almost any damage done to him these days. It was only in the past couple issues of Venom that the authors have really highlighted the fact that, like, look, when Eddie Brock bonded with the symbiote and the symbiote absorbed Eddie's DNA, it gave him the ability to, like, rebuild his body from symbiote goo. Like, Eddie doesn't need a physical form anymore, and you can shoot him, you can tear him apart, you can do whatever you want to him, and he's just gonna goop himself back together. Deadpool can do the exact same thing. So there's only some real stakes to this storyline if that is Dylan Brock, Eddie's son, under that symbiote. Because to the best of my knowledge, Dylan can't do that, or at the very least, he can't do it yet. Maybe he'll get there someday. But right now, Dylan can't do that. And that character is way less experienced than Eddie is, for sure. He's way less experienced. He's a little bit more clever than Eddie. The most recent issue of Venom saw a really clever trick that Eddie did to try and get by some police officers that I really enjoyed. So I will say that Dylan's a little bit more of a thinking man in terms of how to use the symbiote in a fight, which can lead to some interesting stuff with Deadpool. It'll be interesting to see if they reference the fact that Deadpool wore the Venom symbiote at one point in his history, and I'll admit I'm not super familiar with that fact, but it'll be interesting to see if it gets brought up or is used within the nature of this fight somehow. I would give this fight to Venom for a number of reasons. One, again, I would argue Venom is a more popular character than Deadpool in general. That might be my bias, and I will totally admit that's my bias. But there's a reason you've got like 8 different symbiote comic books right now and only 1 Deadpool comic book right now. People like Venom a lot. I like Venom a lot. So 1, Venom's more popular. 2, it's Venom's annual. Same reason for like the Spider-Man book. That's why the character's going to take it. 3, even if it's Dylan Brock, the character has a wide range of abilities that he can bring to bear against Deadpool, and if it ends up being revealed that it is Dylan Brock, this confused teenager who doesn't really know whether he wants to be a superhero or an anti-hero or what right now, I don't think Wade would really attack him all that much. I honestly think he would go, "Oh, you're just a screwed up, messed up kid. So am I. Or so I was, I guess." And kind of call the whole thing off, almost. I do have a hard time believing that Deadpool would, like, honestly stab a teenage boy. I'm not saying he wouldn't do it, but I have a hard time believing that he would do it. So I give this one to Venom with all of the hope in my heart. I don't think either one of these characters is going to be, like, permanently injured or taken down from this at all. Like, that's stupid. These characters are indestructible. They're just going to beat each other up till someone says, "Hey, let's stop and go do something else." Round 7 brings us Captain Marvel versus Cyclops of the X-Men. This is an interesting fight because it should be a pretty one-sided fight. The most recent volume of Captain Marvel, written by Kelly Thompson, it just ended on a really positive team-up with the X-Men. Like, the X-Men helped save Carol from killing herself due to complicated story reasons that I'm not going to get into here. But the point remains that Carol gets along with the X-Men really well. She knows and respects them for the most part. She believes they're professionals. She gets along with them very well, and they treat her extremely well the same. Like, this is a two-way street of respect for both of these characters. But both Captain Marvel and Cyclops are leader-type characters. They're generally both very serious. They're both kind of bad at being, like, normal people. They're really good at being Captain Marvel and Cyclops. They are not great at being Carol Danvers and Scott Summers. So they've got the same kind of, like, humanistic streak between the two of them that I think is really interesting. Carol does have a broader range of powers than Cyclops does, between invulnerability, super strength, flight, the ability to fly through space without breathing, and most importantly, her ability to absorb and redirect energy. And Cyclops' main ability is that he fires energy out of his eyes. This guy's going to be at a disadvantage from the jump. As we can see from this cover, her blocking his powers and absorbing his optic blasts is probably going to be the way that this fight opens. The trade-off with that is Cyclops is a brilliant tactician and strategist in the field. So the second he finds out that he's fighting Carol, or he has to fight Carol, sure, he'll probably try to optic blast her to see what her absorption feels like, or does it drain him? Is it something she can turn on and off? And then he'll start going, what are the other ways I can get at Carol? And it'll be interesting to see how far that goes for him. I don't honestly think Cyclops would endanger other people in order to force Carol to, like, Carol has to save these civilians and then Cyclops gets to, like, punch her or something like that. Because, again, I don't think that's really going to stop Carol all that much. But this one's a hard one to call. Because, like I said, Cyclops can't really do much to harm Carol, but Carol also wouldn't really want to hurt Cyclops either, right? This is clearly an X-Men branded annual. However, we do have the Marvels coming out later this year. November's comes out. The Marvels comes out in November. This annual should come out in October, August, September, October. Yeah, I think this annual comes out in October. So just a month before the Marvels are coming out. I would kind of argue that Captain Marvel's going to win this one, just based on the fact that she's currently a more high-profile character. The X-fan in me is that Cyclops... The X-fan in me hopes that Cyclops wins this fight. I don't see how he does it. Like, it's going to depend on the situation that they find themselves in. What can he manipulate or alter to play to his strengths and to try and damage Carol, right? So that's going to be really tricky, and I don't exactly know how that one's going to go down. But I would give that one to Carol, although the X-fan in my heart hopes that it's Scott. And then I don't have the image of it, but our final fight is the Avengers versus Agatha Harkness in the Avengers Annual, which wraps everything up. I was kind of expecting the way this book would go is that you would do all of these annual fights, and then the winners would team up to fight Agatha. But maybe what's going to happen is all of these side characters are doing these fights, and meanwhile, the Avengers will be dealing with Agatha, and they'll wrap things up. You can see here on your select your fighter screen, we do have Cyclops, Black Panther, and Scarlet Witch represented on, and the Vision, actually, and Sam Wilson as the Falcon Captain America. We do have a number of characters on this cover who are not appearing in the annuals to the best of our knowledge. That's because they will be appearing in the Avengers Annual fighting Agatha and stopping whatever her plan is. I don't know where this goes. It's kind of in the vein of Marvel's Contest of Champions story that they kind of repeat every couple of years, where some D-bag gets all the heroes to fight each other, and then they all team up to fight the villain at the end and be like, "You stop that!" And then they go, "Okay." And then the heroes just kind of ignore the fact that these annuals ever happen. That's kind of the one thing about this book, this story, because it's not a book. That's the one thing about the story that kind of has me nervous, is that nobody's going to care other than what does this storyline do for Agatha Harkness? Because that's kind of going to be the thing, right? Does this end with Agatha having possession of the Darkhold? Does it end with her teaming up with Wanda more long-term in the Scarlet Witch comic book? Does Agatha get sucked into Wanda's soul and she's just kind of kept there with Chthon for the foreseeable future? I find that hard to believe because we do have the Agatha Coven of Darkness Disney Plus show on the way in the next couple of years. So at some point, Agatha's going to be back. But I don't know how this ends other than the characters, most likely what's going to happen is all of our heroes are going to win. They're going to defeat Agatha or stop whatever her current plan is. And then we'll get kind of like an end credit scene where Agatha's like, "Here's the thing I'm up to next. Ooh, I'm not gone yet." That's kind of what happened at the end of the recent Midnight Suns miniseries that saw Agatha turned into her younger form. The main threat of the book was defeated, then Agatha was just kind of left in a position of like, well, I'll be back to do some evil stuff later, which is what we are now seeing here. So yeah, I'm just kind of excited for these fights. I won't lie, I'm not someone who really gets excited for superhero fights all that much, because like, there's so much behind the scenes bullshit that decides who wins these fights. Like I've pointed out in this particular episode, you know, whose comic is this being published in, who's writing it, whose editorial office does it fall under. You know, if a writer is writing a Thor comic and the Hulk shows up, of course Thor is going to beat the Hulk because it's Thor's comic book. You're not going to have the Hulk show up and show up the lead character. That's bad storytelling. So I find it hard to believe that the characters that these comics aren't going to win their books, to be quite honest. I know I put my bets on a couple of these oddball characters, and I hope that they do win. I think this is kind of interesting, and that's the thing that really gets me, is I haven't seen Yi or White Fox interact with the rest of the Marvel Universe. I haven't seen modern badass Storm go up against another like superheroic character. These are some really interesting fights, and I'm looking forward to hopefully getting the chance to explore them. And hopefully it's just going to be a lot of fun. I'm not going to rush to my shop to buy these if and when I do get money. But I do want to see how these go down. What issues are you looking forward to the most out of our beautiful list here? Who do you think is going to win what fight? Who do you put your money on? If this were a bet, who would you be putting money on? And I guess I'll see you next time we do one of these things. Peace. If you enjoyed this episode of Breakdown, please make sure to hit that like button, and if you are not subscribed to the show, then click on that as well. I love getting feedback, and I would really appreciate it if you did so. If you have any questions, concerns, or would like to suggest a comic or a series to me, Breakdown can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and on a variety of podcast platforms, with links in the description for this episode below, as well as the email cbbreakdown@gmail.com. Thank you for your time and attention.